Okay, welcome to the webinar today, end of April 2020. Here we are. Today's topic is one that we're calling sort of a hot topic. This is a short webinar. I'm going to run for 30 minutes and talk about developing a purchasing standard for home offices. My name is Sarah Snabel. I am a registered kinesiologist. I'm a certified professional ergonomist. I'm also one of the co-owners of Pro Ergonomics. And so today I'm going to be leading you through this webinar. I'm kind of excited about this webinar. It's something, again, hot topic in the sense that we've been getting a lot of questions that kind of feed into this topic. And so we thought that it would be a good idea to kind of do this short education session, right? That you can tune in. I am recording the session so that I will post that on our YouTube channel. For those of you who are regular followers, you know that on GoToWebinar, you have the option that you can, chat or send me questions. So if for some reason the sound is cutting out or my screen pauses or, something like that, please shoot me a message. Or if you have questions on anything that I'm talking about, enter them as you're thinking about them. I will make sure to review all of the questions at the end of the webinar and address them then, as opposed to as I'm going through, just so that I can stay on topic and minimize distractions. But that's kind of the format for today. And I just really wanted to start with, thank you for coming to the webinar today and wanting to talk about ergonomics. Hope you're all healthy and safe. I know I was kind of jokingly saying that 2020 is a bit of an odd year, doesn't really know which way is up or down. And I know that, for us at Pro Ergonomics, we are going through some changes too, right? So we are home workers in the sense we all have home offices. We've been working from home for many years. I think we're quite seasoned at doing it, but right now it's not the same, right? I've got my whole family home with me. And so webinars are kind of nice. I tuck away in my own office and I'm not distracted, but that isn't really the reality for the rest of the day. And so kind of realizing that everybody is working from home in different capacities with different distractions. So our strategy at Pro Ergonomics right now is to continue providing support and assistance as we are able. So typically we do a lot of on-site assessments. Obviously that is not happening, but we are doing virtual services to the best of our abilities. So things like webinars, continuing on with our monthly webinars like we're doing right now, continuing with some new webinars that we've been developing, as well as some virtual assessments. So whether it's assessments for home offices or offices for the people who are still working in-house, as well as some virtual PDAs and some job matching and return to work assessments. Whatever we can do to kind of help out, we're there. Ergonomics continues on, the need for it continues on, which just one of our big things that we've been doing is our at-home ergonomics webinar. And so I want to mention this because kind of the reason for developing the webinar today, the topic, developing a purchasing standard, is because the questions that we've been getting coming in sort of from clients, from family and friends, from random people who likely find our website or social media, they kind of fall into two streams. So the one stream of questions seems to be on, how do I set up what I've got going on at home? Like, I don't have a proper office. What can I do to get more comfortable, right? And that's really where this at-home ergonomics webinar that we've developed is coming into play. It's helping people get set up temporarily. It's very practical. We've been getting lots of really good feedback on it, but it is meant to set up a temporary workstation. The other stream of questions that we're getting is more along the lines of, I've got money to spend. What should I be spending it on, right? So, I've got, maybe I've been given $500 to buy some equipment that I need, or that, I'm looking for equipment that I can recommend to my staff because we've got, all of our staff have gone home. We've got some money to spend. What should I be getting for them? What's the priority? Do you have any recommendations for, a chair, a keyboard, a mouse, a blah, 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 a long list of things that I can get for $300, what can we do? So that's kind of where this webinar comes into play, right? Want to talk about how we can, the webinar, the at-home ergonomics webinar that we're doing is a more creative, at-home homemade solutions type of solutions, right? Homemade type solutions. And then the other option is, if I'm going to spend money, what should I be buying it on? The length of time that we're all ordered to stay home is still not super clear. And so many businesses might be contemplating operating more with remote workers in the future. And so thinking about how you're going to spend that money and, really thinking about it from, including ergonomics in it right now is going to help to stretch your dollar, right? It'll help you now, and then it'll be, help you last longer in the future. Because I heard somebody say this recently, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. I don't know if I heard them say it, if I read it on social media, I don't know, some version of this quote. But I'm curious because I'll be intrigued to see how COVID-19 actually influences the future of office workspaces. I bet that there are so many businesses who thought that working remotely was not feasible, or, I'm not interested in doing it. It's not the work model for us. But here we are. We're working from home because we have to. And guess what? There are lots of businesses who are succeeding, right? They are not hitting all of the troublesome challenges, or they're working through some of those challenges because they've been forced to. I mean, in some ways, it's sort of a mess right now. It may not be sustainable in the exact current moment the way that it is, with schools being closed and working parents having their kids home, or lots of people being at home. It's maybe not the ideal work from home situation, but how many businesses, like including your own workplace, are actually maybe considering becoming more lenient in their work from home practices? Once social distancing precautions relax and we are able to go back to work, will we? How will we see that change? Right. So that's kind of where I think that implementing some sort of a purchasing standard, and again, this could be formal. It doesn't have to be super formal, but you might want to consider some type of a purchasing standard. Right? If you have one already for your workplace, like in your, for your organization, that's great. That's totally a check mark. And you might want to tweak it, kind of review that policy and see how it will work for working at home, right? If you don't have one already, that's okay. Now's the time maybe that you might want to consider putting something in place, right? Start with the work from home element. There are some different needs, right? Working at home and working in-house are not the same. The biggest thing being that there are potentially some different needs. If you think about, setting up your office at work, it's sort of cookie cutter, right? Everybody gets the same desk. You work in a cubicle. We have very much the same equipment, but all of a sudden we have people working from home. And guess what? There's not standardization, right? I'm working off a desk, and I've got my own separate office space, but my coworker is living in a one-bedroom apartment, and their partner's also home. And, so somebody gets the dining room table and somebody's got the couch. Right? Space is different in everybody's home. Somebody's got a big, beautiful L-shaped desk and somebody's got a fold-up table, right? We all have different kind of base equipment and space at home. And so that possibly could influence some of the different needs that you might have in terms of equipment and kind of where, like if you're comparing your current purchasing standard or an in-house purchasing standard to what you might need for an at-home solution. So why? I mean, again, the goal of a purchasing standard really is that you're trying to get like essentially a pre-approved list of products or equipment for staff to order from. The list is vetted, it meets certain criteria. For example, things that IT has deemed compatible with the system, but also we're wanting to make sure that it includes ergonomic fit criteria, right? The list might be something that you're working with your current providers because that's how you get a great price, but also making sure that it's going to fit the users as per what they need, as per how it's going to work for them at home, right? If it's not a good fit, then what we're likely to see is discomfort. And then over time, by the time these precautions are lifted, you've got people coming back to work and we're going to see increased injuries. Just because they're working from home doesn't necessarily mean that you're not responsible anymore, right? They're still your employee. We still need to take care of them. It's our due diligence to make sure that we are kind of providing them with the equipment that's going to be the right fit for them, right? It's very possible that if you give somebody, a budget, they might choose the cheapest option, or they might choose something based on the color and not necessarily looking at all of the different features. I mean, it can be overwhelming, even for somebody like me, if I know what kind of features I'm looking for, but if it's from a vendor or somewhere that I'm not as familiar with, like there's a lot of options out there, right? So a purchasing standard or a list, like a pre-approved list, can help with kind of narrowing down those options and make it a little less overwhelming. In terms of coming up with that list, I would suggest that you maybe start with some resources, and you can start with what you're already using in-house. There's no like that would be, use what's tried and true, right? If you are already standardizing to using ergocentric chairs, for example, then that might be where you're getting your best pricing, and that's going to be, that model you're going to continue to have on your standardized purchasing list for at-home ergonomics as well. Your CSA office standard is a great supporting reference document. Again, if you are sort of starting from scratch, you're not even sure where to go. They did revise this in December of 2017. It's now a standard as opposed to a guideline. And it's got some great ergonomic reasonings in there. It's actually much more user-friendly to read than any other previous model. So if you are up for some reading, if you've got some time right now, that would be a good one that I would suggest as a great starting point. Again, make sure that you are using vendors, again, other resources that you might have available. Vendors will know, they can tell you what some of the more popular items are that are being ordered. They can kind of give you some feedback on what's going to work well for portability. If you need to know specs, like in terms of adjustability ranges on the chair, if it's stuff that you're overwhelmed by the website, there are a lot of really great vendors out there. And there's a lot of vendors actually who are catering to this work from home right now. In some ways it can get overwhelming. There's a lot out there being marketed, but at the same time, there are a lot of really great kits. You could go to the Staples, for example, but there are a couple of really good ones. I know I've seen some great packages from Ergo Now, some work from home kits. I've seen some great packages from Ergocentric on, quick delivery on a couple. Again, they've kind of narrowed it down to a couple of great options. So if you're looking for any of those resources, I'm happy to share some of those connections as well if you're looking for something that is like that. And sort of that's where I come into play, right? In Ergonomist, I'm third-party input. I don't get any kind of kickback or anything from selling product. We don't sell product at Pro Ergonomics. We do that for a reason, is to keep ourselves neutral, sort of product unbiased. And so I definitely have some of my favorite brands. I have some of my favorite vendors and whatnot out there because I do like to recommend and network with, good customer service. I want to provide that for my clients. But, often this list is going to come from your tried and true, what you've already been working. It's not necessarily the time to be trialing brand new things. You can't, ship out to home, try it out. You don't like it, send it back, right? We've got some different challenges going on right now. But also trying to think about some different options in each category. So for an example, chair. You might want to standardize to a chair. Would be a good idea to have a couple of different chairs, 2, 3, not a huge long list of chairs, but again, a chair option that's going to work for somebody who's tall, somebody who's petite, just to make sure that you're covering off all of those bases. This is the way that I would describe a purchasing standard for at home versus what you might already have for in-house would be that they come from the same orchard, but they are not necessarily from the same tree, right? So it's not necessarily apples to apples. It's more like apples to oranges, but all part of the same umbrella or all part of the same orchard. It's just that your home office might differ a little bit just based on because we have so many differences when you're going from home. You're not starting from that cookie cutter base template. Also, there's some differences too that, at work, for example, you might be implementing keyboard trays, monitor arms. Guess what? That stuff requires installation. It's sort of a factor when you're considering these at-home ergonomics. So that would be another element that you'd want to consider. We want to make it easy for staff, but still kind of adhering to all of the ergonomic principles. Sometimes, I've been hearing a whole variety of things. Some workers have been able to bring stuff home from work. They're bringing home a keyboard, a mouse, their footrest, their monitor. Some are bringing home just a keyboard and mouse. Some aren't being allowed to go back to the workplace to bring anything home at all. And that's kind of where this budget is coming from, like just buy what you need, or, there's a whole variety of options out there. Working from home, you can hear my dog barking. Challenges. Somebody knocked on the door. So making sure, again, that we are assessing those different scenarios, and making sure that like we still have a responsibility to keep our employees safe. And sure, maybe we want to have them do some homemade solutions, but also making sure that we are keeping them safe. So as an example, I had somebody reach out to me recently looking for how to make a height adjustable desk at home. So she had a height adjustable desk when she worked at work in her office because she had an accommodation from a back injury a year or two ago. Wanted to be able to recreate this at home. Sent me a couple options, said, what do you think? And I said, well, I don't love any of those options because they're great price point, $100, $200 for sure, great price point. I don't think it's actually going to solve your ergonomic challenges, right? It's not going to make a good posture. It's going to allow you to stand, not really going to help you with sitting. Here, what do you think about this one? And I recommended another one, the Ergotron. Company comes back and says, well, we don't know how stable that's going to be on your desk because we didn't provide your desk, therefore we're just going to buy you a new desk, right? So we kind of went back and forth. And in that case, again, it's a good point. Can't control what everybody has at home. So just thinking about different options that you might have that, again, is incorporating safety. So I would suggest that you start with that basic list of equipment, right? You could start listing everything that people have at work, but then start thinking about how that might apply at home, right? So you might have had a keyboard tray and a monitor arm and all of that, but at home, maybe we're going to look for more static monitor risers, or we're going to look for laptop risers. Again, there might be some differences here, but I would again start with just kind of creating a list and then starting to pare back based on, what your company is going to offer. Are you going to do more of a full office setup? If somebody needs a desk, a chair, the whole 9 yards, is that what you're going to provide, or more of a kit, right? So maybe just some of the IT hardware. Think about the features. So again, adjustability is always key here. Oh, sorry, I wanted to go back to that slide. Thinking about some of the adjustability as well. Again, there are some great options, very affordable options too, that if you're going to be working from home long term, again, you can address the needs right now, but it's very possible that people will be working home for more permanent in the future. And so we don't just want to go and slap on Band-Aid solutions everywhere. Band-Aid solutions will work, if you want to use a box as a footrest, it's going to work for right now. Eventually that box is going to be compressed. You're going to put in a new box. Totally works. It's free. However, it's probably not the best solution long term, right? It's not something that I would recommend in the workplace. And I would say, sure, try it out at home for a while. But if we're starting to now make this more of a permanent workstation, you're going to want to sort of upgrade your box to some more solid accessories. Always trying to be practical. Now, a purchasing standard can be various degrees of formality, right? So you could do a purchasing standard and it could be a formal written policy. Absolutely, it could. I know lots of places that do this, and that way then it's controlled in the sense that, especially for a larger organization that has multiple departments or multiple locations, it kind of all goes through, it all funnels to one place. So if you want to buy a chair, then it kind of narrows down the differences that departments are getting. So, this department wants to buy a chair. They kind of go through the purchasing standard policy, and they know which chair they can buy. So it limits the differences so that, you don't have ergocentric chairs over here and like really cheap, awful chairs over in this department. It kind of levels the playing field kind of across the department. You might find that your vendors can help out here in the sense that like maybe you don't have a formal purchasing policy, right? Maybe it doesn't go that route. Again, I know big organizations that have a version of a purchasing standard. It's not necessarily in a formal policy, but they do have contracts with certain vendors. And so they have to buy chairs, for example, from this very particular seating vendor. And so to get a chair outside of that vendor, they kind of got to go through some hoops. Like it's a big approval process. So that contract that they have with that vendor is in some ways a purchasing standard, right? You can't just buy whatever you want when it comes to office furniture, right? So, but if you're going the more formal route, you're wanting to make sure that products are actually ergonomic, right? That we're not just picking things again because of the aesthetics, or that staff aren't necessarily having the choice of just picking things to match their home office decor. Well, I don't want the black chair, I want the pink chair. Well, the pink chair doesn't have the right features, right? We want to limit some of that kind of stuff. We want to include some key elements like the who, the what, the where, who's going to be involved, who's the one that does the purchasing, how do they actually go about it. You want to make it easy as well. So if you want everybody to buy from sort of a standardized list, then we need to make sure that they know about the list. They need to make sure that the stuff on the list is actually going to work, right? Make sure that it's ergonomic. We want to, again, sort of, this is like leveling the playing field here, making sure that it's fair for everyone. Again, so that, employees are going to talk. Well, I got $1,000 and I bought a desk and this and that. Well, I didn't get that. We want to try and limit that. So a policy can really help with, again, making it fair. It's doing your due diligence, kind of making sure, well, this is our policy, we're following it. Again, each organization is a little different in terms of how formal they get with policies. And I do know that it can work. So, I mean, if you're looking for some input on, what you might want to include, you can always reach out and let us know. I would suggest to try to keep it high level. I wouldn't copy and paste directly from something that, you could totally use a template from something that you have in-house right now. But again, kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, that a home office might have some different needs. So all of the exact same equipment, for example, that you might have on your in-home or your in-house, like at work, purchasing list might be a little bit different. So I would try to keep any wording that you have sort of high level. You want it to provide direction and clarity, but not necessarily so binding or rigid that you can't adapt it as our future involves, right? So we want something that kind of works now, but that's going to work in the future too, and give yourself a bit of wiggle room there. So that might be where you kind of want to start with more of an informal policy, and then you can formalize it as we know more information about when we're going back to work and how your company might be adapting. It is always important, no matter what, that we include some training elements, right? So the best equipment, the top notch, the Cadillac of chairs, the Cadillac of all of that equipment, it doesn't necessarily matter if you have that, if you don't use it properly, or if you don't know how to use it properly, right? So part of your policy, part of your implementation process, this development, needs to also include that training. It needs to include some communication, the expectations. So if managers, for example, are needing to go through this purchasing standard, this policy, then they need to know about it, right? They need to know how to use it. They need to know how to actually order. Again, whether it's formal or not, they need to know how to use it and keep it simple. There could be lots of, maybe you've already done office ergonomics training, right, in your workplace, and those principles would still apply. Absolutely, they still apply. We know that we want to get to elbow height, and we want, for typing and mousing, and we know that we want our monitor to be up in line with our eye height, right? Like, people will be trying to recreate that at home, but keep in mind that some of the principles, sorry, not the principles, but how we actually achieve those principles might be different when working at home. So at work, that training is great because we're all working from the same desk. It's 29 inches high. I'm talking about how to adjust your chair and your keyboard tray. The equipment's very standardized. Now, when we're talking about adhering to those principles at home, there might be a little bit more problem solving that comes into play, because we're talking to one person who is working off of their dining room table, somebody who's working off of their kitchen counter, somebody who is working on the couch with like a TV tray. There's a whole variety of different things. So how they get to elbow height might look a little bit different. And so you might want to tweak that training or that education component just a bit, right? To make sure that we are educating our staff on how to use it, right? Not just expecting that, here you go, here's your chair, here's your equipment, figure it out yourself, right? We're still responsible for our staff and need to provide some guidance for them to make sure that they are using it properly. As I mentioned earlier, we do have a couple of virtual services that kind of where we're taking our business right now. So the one is the at-home ergonomics webinar that I did touch on. I did mention though that it is more based on a homemade solutions. So that webinar is geared towards you've gone home with a laptop and a keyboard and a mouse, and basically suggesting that for a short-term temporary solution, if you've got that equipment, I can guide you through, I can walk you through a step-by-step process to get you in the most ergonomic posture as possible, right? We may not be 100%, but we're going to get you really darn close, and we're going to talk about movement and tips. And so that webinar is great for that element. And if you're looking for something that's a little bit more customized, obviously that is doable as well. But it is a webinar that is geared towards those homemade solutions. Any staff that you have working from home who require a little bit more, for example, your staff who were accommodated before we were all issued to working from home, and now they're working at home and don't have all that same equipment, sort of like that example that I said, a client who reached out to me, and she had been accommodated. She'd had an ergonomic assessment in the workplace about 2 years ago. Now she's working from home. She knows that she does well with a sit stand. Now she's working from home. It's been a week. She doesn't have a sit stand. How can we recreate it? So those types of employees might do well with a little bit more one-on-one attention. And we've been doing some virtual assessments with that as well. So keep that in mind as well, just in terms of how you might be able to better help your staff and support them in working from home. 30 minutes goes fast, hey, in a hot topic webinar. So recap here. If you're implementing a purchasing standard, it can look different, right? It can be formal, it can be a little less formal. Every organization is going to be a little bit different, but I would kind of start with thinking about overall how your organization wants to go, right? Have you been sending people home with stuff? Equipment, right? What have you been sending them home with? What's your policy around that? What else could you be giving them? Are you giving them a budget? And who's spending the money, right? And that's sort of going to guide how formal your policy or your purchasing standard needs to get. You want to make sure that you're outlining the equipment, the features, some of those key elements, using your resources, again, making sure that it's not just go to Staples and pick out anything that you want, but kind of narrowing down the options based on criteria, like from the CSA offer standard, based on what an ergonomist would recommend, based on what your vendor is suggesting is the best option for price points, right? Those kinds of things you want to make sure that you're considering. Write it down if you need to, right? Again, that's how we adhere to it. That's how we keep it fair, whether you're making it a formal policy or not. If it is written down, it's going to help people to adhere to it, right? Then the expectations are a lot more clear on what we're going to buy and how much, and make sure that it's fair for each employee. And summarizing with training and communication again, so that ties back into the policy, is that now you're providing training and communication based on what's outlined in your policy or your purchasing standard. Well, I talked your ear off for a good 30 minutes there. That went really quick. I'm going to leave this open for questions right now. If you have any questions, please type them in. I can see a few people have been typing in some questions here. So I will come to them in a second. If you have any other questions that you think of after the fact, please don't hesitate to reach out. We do have right now, if you visit our website, proergonomics.ca, we do have a resource kit for working from home. It's a little download. If you haven't already visited our website to grab that, you could do that. If you're already on our email list, I think signing up on the website doesn't automatically send it to you. So just send an email to info@proergonomics.ca if you're looking for any kind of a download or resource for that working at home kit. It's a nice little one-page summary. Okay, so let me pop open the questions. I'll read out the first question to you. So what do you do about staff that are not interested in learning or using the ergonomic training provided? Great question. So staff who are not interested in learning or staff who are not using the training provided, this is a great question because this applies even in the workplace, right? That we deliver training, but how do we enforce it, right? So we've delivered training, you need to be at elbow height. This is safe as per the CSA standard in terms of what you should be doing, and how do we enforce it. And obviously at home, that becomes a little harder, a lot harder. And so you'd probably want to consider, that would be like in your policy and expectations, right? Making sure that they're working from that, signing off on the training. It would be no different than other training that you're essentially expecting them to do. Some of the training that we've been delivering, like that at-home ergonomics webinar, I know a lot of people have been offering it more as like an interest topic for staff, and not necessarily making it mandatory. So ultimately, that kind of comes down to your internal organization's um, what do you call it, policies on how you're going to follow up sort of with, I don't want to say discipline, but again, the adherence. And it might be somebody that is, if you've got sort of like a problem case, might be an opportunity where you are doing kind of that follow-up, that one-on-one. I know our virtual assessments are based on pictures as well as a video chat is really our preference, so that we can kind of help guide them through, why they might be adjusting something a bit differently. Next question. Again, if at any point you need, I'm going to go through, there's a few questions I can see coming in. If you need to get to your next meeting, whichever, that is great, all fine. And I will send a follow-up with the recording to the webinar after the fact. But if you are around for some questions, there's no rush. I'm here. Hi, Sarah. Do you have any standard form of questions about discomfort I could use? I do have a form. General questions that I might ask would be just sort of leaving them open-ended, getting people to ask about discomfort. I would probably not change it a whole lot different from like a standard office ergonomic assessment. There are different varieties out there. Sometimes I've seen a form. Standardized forms are always good. That means that you're asking the same questions or kind of doing the same interview or assessment process from employee to employee. And I've seen some forms where they actually kind of draw out like the diagram of the person and kind of mark off where the discomfort is. That's the same kind of thing that you could do here. I wouldn't necessarily change my questions about discomfort. If you're looking for a template, I will follow up with you and see if our standard template can be of use. And if anybody's looking for that, you can always shoot me an email too, and I can send that off to more people. Question, where could we find budget-friendly ergonomic chairs? We are a not-for-profit and don't have a large budget for equipment. Great question. I know of a couple of different places. So it kind of depends on what your budget is, and kind of even for not-for-profit, I know that each organization kind of has a different opinion of what is expensive or not expensive. I know, for example, that there are some great chairs that Ergocentric is offering a package right now that is like, I think, don't quote me, $4.95 or something for an air-centric chair, which is a great chair. If that is still a pricier option, then I know that there are, I think Ergo Now sent me a package as well with some other chairs that they're under $500. Don't quote me on the price, but I will send you that information. And if anybody is looking for any of those flyers, if you are looking for product kits, I'm happy to share those because I've had vendors sending them to me. And so I'm happy to share that information. Just shoot me an email, info@proergonomics.ca, to remind me so that I don't forget. Can you share a purchasing standard template? I will check what we've got. I don't know that we have a full-on purchasing standard template, but I think we have something. We have something because I know Alex has done my business partner Alex has done a purchasing standard for, she helped Georgian College do one in particular. And so I know that we have some templates. So let me follow up with you on that. I have a follow-up question about discomfort for people working from home. Yes, I would. Discomfort for people working from home, my questions would be the same if they're working from home versus working in an office, because, but just their answers might be different, right? They might be telling you discomfort that they weren't telling you in the office. They might also be describing a lot more, right? Like their office doesn't look the same, and it's harder to visualize. So now they're talking about, trying to describe their office, but I think my questions would still be the same. Okay, let me check. Have I missed any questions? Again, if you think of any questions after the fact, please don't hesitate to follow up. I am all for sharing whatever resources that I've got. Happy to help. You know, these are weird times right now. We're all trying to work from home, which is, you know, in theory, maybe great. Maybe some people are embracing it and loving it. And for others, it's a huge challenge, a little bit overwhelming, a little bit stressful. And so any way that we can help from that ergonomic component or perspective, I'm happy to help. Okay, I don't see any more questions that I have missed, but I will stay on for a few more minutes. If you've got to get going to your next meeting or your next commitment or lunch, I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll do another webinar next month, May. You know, and you can always send us. I don't have it scheduled yet. I don't even have the topic picked yet. So if there is a burning topic that you are really interested in me presenting on, then send in your suggestions. I'd love to hear it. And you know, maybe that's what we'll do. Maybe we'll do like a voter's choice for May. Great. Have a great day.